Okay, let's continue here at the top of page 116. Does anyone want to read? We're at the words in terms of its place in the structure of the Sefirot, in the structure of the attributes. So the place of that is quite significant. And this is what Rabbi Stein's here is explaining. Does anyone want to read? Anyone?
I'll read.
Please, Margo, go for it.
Okay. I haven't been keeping up that much, but I'll try. Okay.
That's fine.
In terms of its place in the structure of the Sefirot, Dat is of a lesser stature than Chachma or Bina. Chachma and Bina are not only the Sefirot's attributes, but also Partsufim, faces or configurations, entities with independent and meaningful characteristics. Dat, on the other hand, is an only auxiliary attribute, so to speak, the force that unites Chachma and Bina. Yet Dat plays an extremely important role in the operation of the attributes in the soul. Although it does not build awareness, it determines its actual power and influence. What is perceived by Chachma and understood by Bina is acquired only by Dat, whose function is the acquisition of knowledge, its relation to oneself. Hence, the Midrash says, if you have acquired Dat, what do you lack? If you lack Dat, what have you acquired?
Right. That question sounds familiar. I think we read it last week. So let's continue just a little bit more. Just
Okay.
one more little paragraph here, and then I want to understand this idea together with you. Continue.
Okay. Dat is not just the accumulation of the results of Chachma and Bina. It also has an active function to summarize and deduce. It fixes in the soul the picture that is absorbed by Chachma and developed by Bina, rendering their constantly changing processes into a focused awareness.
Right. So Da'at plays a funny role because on the one hand, it stands alone. On the other, it does not. Why does it stand alone? So when we try and apply an idea, just think of it in very practical terms. When you try and apply a business idea, when you have an educational idea that you want to share with your children, and you want to apply it so that it makes an impact, so that it does leave an imprint. So on the one hand, that idea was thought of already, right? You already cooked it in your mind. Now you are going to apply it. So it doesn't stand. It doesn't stand alone. It's really a product of Chochmah and Bina, of what you've thought of for so long. But on the other hand, it's also it does stand alone. It's also quite new because the application of the idea can really bring you to an understanding of the idea that you couldn't have thought of alone, right? So say, for example, I have an invention, whatever it may be. It could be an abstract invention or a physical invention. I don't know. I have an invention of, I'm looking at a pen here. So that this pen should, instead of squirting ink, it should squirt apple juice, whatever it may be, right? Now, I thought of this idea for a long time. I know exactly how the pen should look like, what type of apple juice should be in it, everything else. But then when I actually apply it to the market, it might work, it might not work. The market is going to teach me a lot about this pen that until now was only in my mind and in my possession right here. So on the one hand, it's a product of Chochmah and Bina, of my own mind. On the other hand, it's also going to become a product of the market, whatever the market is going to tell me about this idea. And it might work, it might not work based on the reaction of the market. Same here in everything. I think it's true in education. We might have in our minds what we may think is a brilliant educational idea. We share it with our children and it doesn't click. So that really is the confirmation of the truth of your idea. If it has truth, it will stick. If it doesn't have truth, it will not stick. That's why that could also be a very, very humbling experience, because you thought, oh, you got this. You thought, yeah, after all, you spent so much time on this. But no, once again, it does not depend just on you alone. It depends on how the other will receive this. Now, practically speaking, and I think on a human level, on a psychological level even, I think therefore that has that question that resonates, that stated by the Midrash here by Rabbi Stans. If you have acquired that, what do you lack? You don't lack much. I mean, you think to yourself, okay, I've reached the epitome of wisdom. I've used everything in here to create a product, to create this. But on the other hand, if you lack that, what have you acquired? If you lack that of that ability to listen to the market, to listen to the other, to connect with the other on that level, then you really haven't acquired anything. Then it's just an idea. Then it really has no tangible aspect to it, no truth to it. If you understand what I'm saying, I know it's a little bit profound, but I think to speak about relationships, because this is what God is about at the end of the day. It's, the Sefirot are all about our relationship with God. Think on when we speak of our connection with God, we ought to think in these terms too, that on the one hand, yes, we have our view of God, our view of how God should bless us and God should not bless us, how we should serve his purpose in this world, how we should not serve his purpose in this world. We have our very limited view of what we think God is. But then that comes only from Chokhmah and Bina. What does Da'at come to do? Da'at comes to do the actual work for yourself. So you go and you connect to God on an action level. You go and you fulfill your purpose. And you say to yourself, I know I'm going to do this for this and this purpose. It happens so many times. I'm sure it's happened in your life. You think, for example, you're going to visit the sick. You're doing God's work in this world. That's your Chokhmah Bina that led you to connecting to God in a way that you concluded that this is the way I ought to connect to God today, by visiting the sick, by fulfilling that commandment of his. And you go and you fulfill you fulfill that commandment, you visit the sick, and all of a sudden you realize, 1 second, that's not what I have to do. God had a whole other plan for me. Maybe a whole other plan with the sick person himself. Maybe the sick person didn't really want your words. Maybe he wanted your favor. Maybe you came to visit the sick and the sick told you, you know what? I need you to go shopping for me. That wasn't your intention. You wanted to go and visit him. But that was God's intention. Or you go and visit the sick, and in the hallways of the hospital, you meet someone else. And you meet someone else that all of a sudden has a deep impact on you, that you have a deep impact on them. That also wasn't part of your plan. It wasn't, certainly it didn't come from Chokhmah and Bina. That's self-made. Where did it come from? That ability to let go of yourself, to say, you know what, I'm in this relationship now with God. And I know that it's not only about what I think of God and how this relationship should work. It's about what God thinks of me and how this relationship should work from his standpoint. So all of a sudden open myself up to this guy in the hallway when I go and visit the sick, or to what the sick person really wants, not just what I want from this visit, but what he wants from this visit. And that's that, the ability to, yes, do everything, put everything in motion so that you actualize the Chokhmah and Bina, but on the other hand, also to let go of everything in motion, to be able to listen to what God wants from you. And that's why I said, I think that demands the most humility. But on the other hand, without that, no relationship can be a relationship. If I can let go of myself, I have to put my whole self in it, to invest myself. But if I can let go of myself, then I can't really connect. I'll have a Chokhmah Bina type of relationship. But that's a very selfish one. It's a very self-oriented one. It's a very narrow one, a very limited one, because it's limited only to your thoughts. That is that ability to let go and connect fully with the other. This is what this is saying. So it's not just an accumulation, to quote the words of Rabbi Stans again, it's not just the accumulation of the results of Chokhmah and Bina, in other words, of what my mind thought and developed, but it also has an active function that comes, by the way, again, from somewhere else, from my ability to let go. You know, there's a very Christian expression that says that you have to lose yourself in God to find yourself in God, or something like that, right? I think, you're familiar with it? You have to, so here, I think Judaism, in a way, and I've thought about this in the past when I heard this expression first, I think that says the opposite. You have to find yourself in God and then lose yourself in God. Not lose yourself and then find yourself. You first have to find yourself, figure out, okay, what am I doing now for God today? What's my Chokhmah Bina telling me? What's good for me? How am I going to fulfill my own purpose? For that, you have to use your mind. But once you've reached a conclusion and you actualize it, then you also have to lose yourself. By losing yourself, you are expanding yourself to opportunities that you could have never come to by yourself, but with your own Chokhmah and Bina. And that's exactly what Da'at does. I think, by the way, it's one of the key elements in every relationship. We're speaking right now about the relationship with God. And I think it's true with friends, it's true with spouses, it's true with children. They teach us so much more than we could have ever taught ourselves. That's why there's a great expression. I forget the author. People quote Rabbi Akiva, but it's not Rabbi Akiva who said that. One of the great teachers in the Talmud says, Rabot lamati mi rabotai, I learned a lot from my teachers. I learned a lot also from my peers, but I learned the most from my students. How can you learn from your students? You're the one who is teaching your students. But no, that's the point. When you apply those ideas and your students give you that sounding board, so to speak, you learn so much more. But a teacher has to be able to be open to that, because you want to teach what you want to teach. You know, Elie Wiesel, I'm reading his memoirs again now, this for like the third time. He's got 2 books of his memoirs called All the Rivers Flow to the Sea. That's memoir, book number 1. Book number 2 is And the Sea is Never Full, which is really a verse from Ecclesiastes. But he writes, so often he came to give a speech, and he speaks about a speech like that at the United Nations. He came to give a speech about the Holocaust very often, and he had a set speech to give. He knew exactly what he was going to say, every single word. And very often, and he's speaking about a very specific speech at the United Nations, he comes, he senses the room, and he says, no, that's not the speech, they need a year. So very often he would just put his speech aside and give the speech that the room was telling him to give. At least that he was sensing that the room was telling him to give. That's the art of a great teacher, of a great connector, of a great spouse, of a great friend. Sometimes to be able, fine, I prepared my chokhmah and bina. I have my speech, but that's not what's demanded of me right now. Let me put it aside and connect to what the room wants from me. That is, again, I think that's why that is probably the most important element of relationships. And that's why maybe that is used in the Torah in the context of relationships. Like we said before, Adam knew Eve. To know, that means to know. To know means not that I know from my own senses, I know from the other person's own senses. I know him so well, or her so well, that I put myself in their shoes, that I'm completely with them. I let go of myself, and that's the depth of my knowledge. So that's really what this is saying.
Rabbi? Hi, it's Amy. I have a question here.
Yes, Amy, please.
Okay. We talked about last week about dot. When you utilize dot, you become completely humble and open to the other. Well, that's what we said today.
Right.
However, when you do that, and it all seems to work, and there is this sense of utter exhilaration.
Right.
How can you be humble or can you be humble and exhilarated at the same time?
Sure, that's a great question, because exhilaration has some self-oriented
exactly
ingredients to it. I would say yes, that's true for exhilaration in general. I think the ultimate exhilaration is the exhilaration where I'm completely one with the other, that my joy is really the others. My exhilaration is really the others. It's not mine. But because of that connection, of that oneness with the other, then I feel it too. I think you find that in real friendships. You know, again, Elie Wiesel, in that book of memoirs, that's the last time I'm going to quote him, if need be. But he defines true friends. It's interesting. It's an interesting take. He says most people will tell you that true friends are people that are there with you in times of distress. He disagrees. He learned this from his teacher, a very mysterious character who he bumped into in Europe. It's a whole story in and of itself. But his teacher taught him that true friends are people that, not people that share your moments of distress, but it's people that share your moments of joy. And the example that he shares is, say you win the lottery today, right? You just won $100 million. Most people, 99% of the people, will have some level of jealousy towards that victory, that winning of $100 million. True friends will have zero jealousy. They'll truly be happy for you. That might never see a cent of those $100 million, but they'll be happy for you. Why? Because they so won with you, it's as if they won. So there is a level of exhilaration in true friendship that is not self-oriented. It's hard to attain it. But when I'm truly one with the other, as it is in times of distress, in times of pain, I feel the other person's pain. But it's also true, and even more so true, in times of joy. So, it's a good point, but it can be achieved, I think, look, Amy, you're a musician. I think you're a concert pianist. So we've spoken, I think we've shared this idea before, but I think you find this in music and in art too, that a person is so one with their instrument that it's about their instrument. It's not about them anymore. You reach that level, right, in the middle of a concert where you've let go of yourself. So you had to prepare everything. You had to have years and years of training in order to be able to play at that level. And then you finally sit down and you play the piano and you get so immersed into it that you feel as if you've shedded yourself completely. And that's about Beethoven, whoever you are playing. And it's about the instrument itself and however that instrument is being played. It's not about you anymore. But that, and the irony of that is that any performer knows that that's the peak of their performance. Mm. That there's no greater moment of exhilaration than that let go of the self.
It's so true, Rabbi.
Right? So true. Yeah, I think painters feel that when they reach that level in their painting, and many artists feel that in their own domain. But that's exactly what Da'at is. That moment, that's Da'at. So you know a lot, you had to prepare, Chochmah and Bina. I mean, you can't reach those levels without actual real preparation. But once you've hit that level of connection where you're one with the other, that's it, that's Da'at.
Thank you, Rabbi.
No, sure, thank you. Thank you.
A great question, Amy.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Jordan.
Any other really, please, let's have this, let's continue to have this discussion more than anything else. I mean, that's what learning is about, right? That's what Da'at is about. It's knowing the other. So feel free to share your minds or disagree or ask questions or whatever it may be. Otherwise, we can continue.
It's
yes, Margot.
Reading about when there's something we like some knowledge or concept, we can identify with it, we can dissociate from it, or we can transcend it. And so it's almost like we need I don't remember those words, Chochmah and Bina. We have to have ourselves, as you're saying,
right,
and then transcend ourselves to, or let go of ourselves to meet the other, but we can't meet the other before we can't bypass ourselves to meet the other, because that you see that too,
right?
People who just are in giving or listening and not aligned to themselves. So it's relating to something I was reading last night, actually.
No, it's true. It's true. I mean, yeah, there's a danger, right? Because when you give of yourself to the other completely and you put yourself aside, as mentioned, you have that moment of Da'at or those moments of Da'at, then you can disalign yourself. This is what you're saying. I mean, then you
can't, yeah, it's like
forget about yourself. Right.
Yeah, you can't bypass.
Right.
You transcend.
Right. So you're now going into a very prominent and profound concept in Kabbalah too, which is called Ratzov Vashov. Ratzov Vashov means to run forward and to come back, to run forward and to come back. And there's that constant movement in the worship, in our service of God in general, in this world, in our actualization of purpose. On the one hand, you have to give, right? You have to reach those moments of Da'at. On the other hand, you also always have to come back. If you don't come back, you lose yourself completely in that giving. And then you have nothing else to give because yourself is no longer there. Now, that's why you constantly have to come back. I think that's the power of prayer 3 times a day that realigns you. That's the power of being able also to be grounded in this world, in this material world that grounds you. That's an excellent point. You know, I'm reminded of Ben Azai. Ben Azai was a Talmudic sage in the times of Rabbi Akiva, some 2,000 years ago, who, along with Rabbi Akiva and two others, Ben Zoma and Elisha ben Abuya, went to study the secrets of the Torah. To study the secrets of the Torah, you also need to let go of yourself. It's a different type of letting go, but you have to be completely immersed to be able to absorb the secrets of the Torah. You know, it's like a vessel. I can't put anything in this cup if it's full. If I empty the cup, then I can absorb what will come in it. Same here, in order to study in general, especially the secrets, the deeper secrets of Kabbalah, I have to empty my cup. So they had to empty their cups completely and let go of themselves. Ben Azai was a person who really was so selfless, but in a bad way, that there was no shov, there was no return. And that's why when he actually went to let go of himself and to study the secrets of the Torah, Pardes, then he died. Then he died. Then his soul expired. Because when there's that constant movement of the soul upward, forward, it leaves the body. If you aren't able to return to yourself and to your senses and to this world and to something that's grounded, then God forbid, it can cause that expiration of the soul, of course, in the holiest of holies. By the way, Ben Azai is also one who taught that one should engage in the first commandment of the Torah, which is pru urvu, be fruitful and be multiply. And they told him, Ben Azai, it's nice of you to teach this teaching. You never got married. So how can you do that? You have to practice what you preach. And Ben Azai says, you're right. What can I do? My soul desires to study Torah so much that I have no time for marriage. But a person like that who's only allowing his soul to let go of himself, of his ego, is a person that will eventually die, expire. You have to be able to have that ratzon and shov all the time. And I think that's the hardest part of life, because it fluctuates. On the one hand, you're there. On the one hand, you come back to yourself. That's why I think one of the ways to really remedy that fluctuation or the side effects of this fluctuation is to have a structured day, to know that now I'm giving, and now I'm praying, and I'm returning to myself, and now I'm focusing on myself. Now I have moments of meditation, and now I have moments of complete devotion to the other. I think that structure, that time management, helps a lot in helping the ratzon and shov create a healthy balance where I don't feel so much the fluctuation, but I'm healthy enough to know when to be here and when to come back here. Good point. Rabbi Akiva, by the way, who was a man who knew exactly to give his whole, his entire self, but on the other hand, also to constantly work on himself, constantly develop his own growth, his own self-growth, was one of those four sages who went to study the secrets of the Torah, and says he went in peace and he came back in peace. What does peace mean? Peace means wholesomeness. That you're wholesome because you know when to give and when to focus on the self, when to retract a little bit. I think all the greats, I mean, look, I see Rabbi Steinsaltz, the author of this commentary here. I know he had times where he gave his entire self, and sometimes those were very planned, and sometimes those were not planned at all. But he also had times, and those times usually were 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, where he sat down and studied for himself to continue his own self-growth. The fountain forever gives. It will have nothing to give from if it doesn't replenish itself. So he had times where he replenished himself. I think it's true for the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Lubavitcher Rebbe had times where he studied, where he locked himself up in the room, and that's it. So you're right. You have to have the ratzon and shov. Very good point. Other hand, again, I think that pertains to the greats. Most people have a problem with the ratzon, with the first step of letting go of themselves. I mean, if you look at the average human being in our society, none of you, of course, God forbid, but average human being is focused on what can I do for me? What's in it for me? What about the ratzon coming out, letting go of your me, and giving something? You know, there's an expression in English I never quite understood. And that is the expression of pay back. I'm going to pay back, give back to society, giving back. Why do you have to add the word back? Why only once you've received, then you can give? You can just give. You have to have the ratzah, whether it's connected to how much you receive from society or not. It doesn't matter. Even if society gave you nothing, you as a human being have to give. So why giving back? Just give. And in a way, that's what this ratzah is. That's why it's so, this dot idea is so relevant to our society. Okay, so thank God you've developed yourself. Your chokhmah and bina are well developed. When is that coming? Whether society gave you something or not, go and exercise that. Go and do that ratzah. Then you'll come back to the shov. You'll come back to yourself. But it's not dependent on what society gave me or did not give me. The giving is a crucial part of every human being. Rabbi Steinsaltz himself says, and I've heard him say that it's like eating, right? When you eat something, you have to give. You have to go to the bathroom. If not, it creates constipation. He says that this idea of not being able to give creates what he calls spiritual constipation. And who wants to live with any type of constipation, physical or spiritual? But you're growing, you're eating, your body is, thank God, healthy. So go ahead, give. You know, they say that about the 2 seas of Israel, the 2 seas in Israel, 2 main seas. You have the Sea of the Galilee in the north and the Dead Sea in the south. The Galilee Sea receives a lot of rainwater, and it gives water to the inhabitants of Israel and to other places now. I think to the Jordan Valley, but also to the country of Jordan too. The Dead Sea only receives rainwater. It doesn't give anything. It doesn't give water. It gives mud. It gives maybe other things. It doesn't give water. But that's exactly why it's called dead. If you receive and you don't give, then you're dead. You're a dead sea, spiritually dead. The Kinneret, on the other hand, the Sea of the Galilee, is a sea that's full of life. And why? Because it receives and it gives. So God gave you such blessings right here. Don't wait for society to give to you. Now, go and do that. Go and exercise that. Now, it's hard because that is also the point of view, your life, where you become most vulnerable. When you have to let go of yourself and really connect to the other, then you're as vulnerable as it gets. And it's hard to expose your vulnerability. You almost feel like you're compromising yourself. But on the other hand, it's the most necessary step for your wholesomeness, for that going in peace and coming back in peace, like Rabbi Akiva. You know, we used, I think, a few weeks ago, that example of the ladder. Rabbi Steinsaltz says that also in many other places. But the only way to grow, to climb a ladder, is to become vulnerable, to lose your balance, to stand on 1 foot. If you're standing on 2 feet and you're firm in your grounds, you'll never be able to go to the next step of the level, of the ladder. But if you lose your balance and you stand on 1 foot, that's when you can actually grow and go to the next step of the ladder. I think it's true. That's what Da'at does. Da'at comes to shake you to the point that you can't stand on 2 feet anymore. But that loss of balance, that vulnerability, is what enables you afterwards to grow. Not just you to grow, but I think the world to grow. If you keep it here, the world will never grow. If you take it out of yourself and you really connect to the other and you give to the other and you visit the sick and you had your visit very well planned, but you're open completely to what God has in store for you in that visit, like the example we used, then not only do you grow from that experience, like that rabbi who said, I learned the most from my students, but also the world grows. The world becomes one big ladder that's climbing from ramp to ramp each and every time. And that's really what Da'at does. So you have the ratzah that's most needed, I think, in our society. The shov is also important, but it's that ratzah, that Da'at, that's as needed as it gets.
So, Rabbi,
yes,
if Da'at then is an intellectual attribute, and the others are, I think you said emotional, the other
Yeah.
7. Isn't dot kind of in between the two more than just an intellectual?
That's right. That very well said. That's correct. So dot stands in between the two. So I don't know if we have it here in the book, but in the Kabbalistic chart, where you see almost a human image and the 10 attributes attributed to each part of that human image. So dot really is in the middle. Dot is what connects the intellect and then the rest of the emotions, the body, so to speak. You're right, because at that point of connection, when I let go of myself and I connect fully to the other, that's when emotions are born. That's when true love then can be born. That's when kindness can be born. That's when all those good emotions can be born. If I have no connection, I really have no emotion. I could have emotions for myself, but those are selfish emotions, and therefore they are rotten to begin with. At that point of selfless connection, then I give birth to emotions that are healthy, that can help me continue to grow. So you're right. Da'at is also a connection between Da'at is an emotion in a way. It's an intellectual attribute, but on the one hand, because of what it does, it also becomes an emotional one. Which teaches us, by the way, what true emotions are about. True emotions are about true emotions are product of our intellect. Emotions that just come from the outside, external, say fear, for example. A lot of people are feeling fear these days. Fear, panic. If my fear and panic just comes from the outside, I woke up afraid, I don't know what's going to be with this COVID-19, and there's no chokhmah and bina attached to it, then those emotions are very unhealthy. Why? Because there's no way we can deal with them. They haven't been analyzed. It's like an enemy we don't know how to decipher. That's not an enemy we can beat. An emotion that just comes from the external world, that's a very bad emotion. It's an emotion that could cause a lot of destruction. An emotion that comes from chokhmah and bina and dat is a controlled emotion. It's an understood emotion. And therefore, if it becomes negative, or if it becomes too positive, there's such a thing too. When I'm so happy that I'm delusional, for example, right? Then I can go back to the chokhmah and bina that gave birth to it and analyze it and then reconfigure it and make it, channel it in a way that it remains a healthy emotion, right? So that's why I think that plays such a crucial role here in our ability to create healthy emotions, to create healthy sefirot that will come thereafter. I want to connect this. I know we're reaching the end of the class, but I want to connect this to Shavuot that's coming up this Thursday night, Friday, and Shabbat. It's the festival in which we celebrate really the receiving of the Torah on Mount Sinai. We read the 10 Commandments, and we almost relive that experience on Mount Sinai where we received the Torah. But what's most interesting is that that's what God did on Shavuot. What happened on Shavuot? God gave us the Torah, but according to many sources, the Torah already existed. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah all knew of the Torah. So what happened on Mount Sinai? Kabbalistically, what happened on Mount Sinai is that God went and exercised these da'at towards us and towards the world. God said, you know what, I'm coming down on Mount Sinai, signifying his ability to come and connect to us human beings. And we also went up on Mount Sinai. Moses went up to receive the Torah, also signifying just that. We are letting go of our chokhmah and bina in order to da'at, in order to know God. That's what happened. It's that level of connection that happened on Shavuot, a da'at type of connection in Kabbalah. That's exactly what Shavuot is about. And what's interesting is that then God said, okay, now we've experienced da'at together. We each let go of ourselves to connect at that intimate level, that intimacy level, in that selfless level. Now you take the da'at and I'll give you a GPS so that you can use it for the world. The Torah is meant to come and benefit the world. That's why the Torah was given to this world, to benefit the world. Take everything you study in your Torah, the chokhmah and bina that you use to study the Torah, and go and connect to the world with it. Go and da'at the world with it. That's really what Shavuot is about. So I think it's no coincidence whatsoever that we're learning about that just before Shavuot, to remind us of our collective purpose, to take this holiday in which we receive the Torah and now bring it out to the world. Let's not wait for the world to give to us. We can just give without giving back. Give the world the beauty and the light of the Torah, because when we speak those words of God by putting ourselves aside, it resonates. It ignites souls. It ignites a light in those souls that then illuminates. And whether we know a lot of the Torah or don't know a lot of the Torah, if I know Aleph, I want to teach Aleph. That's all I know. If I know just the commandment of loving your fellow as yourself, then let me teach it. Because when we teach God's words with a level of connection with that, then it resonates and it certainly illuminates our world.